Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 171 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we bid you to a parting feast.
Except that we're not going anywhere, and neither are our listeners, we hope. Folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room, and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, whose, eyes glint like jet set in yellow stones, maybe? I don't know. Alan Sisto, you know who it is.
You should see my burnished gold beak, Sean.
I think I'll pass. Thank you very much, though. I'm sure it's impressive, but why don't we just go ahead and move right past that and into our intro segment today?
All right.
And this is going to be a new Tolkien quote of the day. In this episode, we get to Galadriel's Song of Eldamar. That's the first of two songs that she sings in this chapter that are kind of thematically linked. Both of them are laments for Valinor, the land where, of course, people who have been with us since season 1 know that Galadriel was born there, and she's...
And even some people who haven't joined us until 3 weeks ago, they still might very well know that Galadriel
probably picked
was born
up on
there.
that since we talked about it a few episodes ago, didn't we?
Yeah. For several episodes in a row, we talked about Galadriel,
Yeah.
so yeah.
So she was born there, but she's lost Valinor as an exile in Middle-earth.
That's right.
Now, both of these songs are textual ruins, really, to the first-time reader, but they take on a lot more meaning to those of us who know the history in the Silmarillion, or to those of us who listen to this podcast. Now, the one of those poems we're going to get today is the one that's actually in Westron, or English.
Right.
But the one we'll get next time at the end of the chapter is in Quenya. And as I was thinking about that poem and this poem, I was thinking about this connection between Elvish legends and Elvish languages. And that's what brought me to today's quote. This is from letter number 180. It's kind of a long quote, but honestly, I kind of feel like I say that every time we do this bit, so who cares?
Because it kind of happens every time we do this bit.
It does, but that's all right.
Yeah.
It works out. And we're going to break this one up
does.
at least.
All right.
All right, I'll start. It was just as the 1914 war burst on me that I made the discovery that legends depend on the language to which they belong. But a living language depends equally on the legends which it conveys by tradition. For example, that the Greek mythology depends far more on the marvelous aesthetic of its language, and so of its nomenclature of persons and places, and less on its content than people realize, though of course it depends on both, and vice versa.
Right. And he goes on to name a bunch of modern conlangs, Esperanto, Novial, and others that you may have heard of if you've read Dimitri Fimi and Andrew Higgins' edition of A Secret Vice.
Which you should.
Which you should. You absolutely should. And you should listen to the episode in which we spoke with the two of them.
Absolutely.
It was our very first interview, and I think it might have shown. I don't know.
They were wonderful.
They were.
I would say the content was wonderful.
Yeah. The hosts, maybe, I don't know.
I think we did all right.
The guests were awesome. So
that's what we're here to do, is make our guests shine, right?
That's right. That's right. So anyway, after talking about these modern constructed languages, these modern conlangs, he says that these are dead, far deader than ancient unused languages, because their authors never invented any Esperanto legends. So though being a philologist by nature and trade, yet one always primarily interested in the aesthetic rather than the functional aspects of language, I began with language. I found myself involved in inventing legends of the same taste. The early work was mostly done in camps and hospitals between 1915 and 1918, when time allowed.
Okay, so that all makes sense. He's talking about language and legends and the connection between them and how he got started with his mythology. But then he takes a complete right turn and
Yes,
says
he
something
does.
else that I had totally forgotten was in the same letter. And it was when I saw this that I was like, we've got to get this quote in here.
No doubt.
Because I love it.
Yeah.
So he says, but I think a lot of this kind of work goes on at other. To say lower, deeper, or higher introduces a false gradation. Levels. When one is saying, how do you do? Or even sleeping. I have long ceased to invent, though even patronizing or sneering critics on the side praise my invention. I wait till I seem to know what really happened, or till it writes itself.
Wow. Wow.
That's the cool
Yeah.
bit.
Isn't it?
And yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
It really is.
And as much as I started out wanting to get the first part of that quote into this episode, it was really that last part. I was like, man, we got to talk about this because I feel like we
have
haven't
to.
in a long time.
I don't think we have.
No, I don't think we have. You know, we've talked about inspiration once upon a time, and it comes up from time to time, but...
Well, right. The idea that he wasn't inventing anything, but that he was simply discovering myths that existed long before. Right.
Yeah, I think we've hit on that, hinted at it a little bit here and there, but...
Yeah, especially when we talked about frame narrative.
Yeah. So anyway, let's go back and let's break down this quote that we've shared
Sure.
here. We go back to the beginning and he talks about this idea that language depends on legends and that legends depend on language. Thank
Right.
goodness he decided that, because that's why we have everything that we have, right?
That is absolutely right. Right. He was a linguist. He wanted to come up with this language,
yeah.
but he needed to tell the stories first. He needed to have them not so much first, but simultaneously. They're coeval, to use another word that Tolkien's used a few times.
Yeah.
That you have to have both, and that he had to have stories for these people to speak in this language that he wanted to create.
Yeah.
And absolutely, language does depend on legends and vice versa.
And it's that he talks about how this is just as true for real world languages. So he gives the example of Greek as it is for invented languages. And he talks about the fact that the appeal of Greek mythology is as much about its language and its nomenclature of people and places as it is about content. Actually, he says it's more about those things and less on its content than people realize.
That's
but
correct.
It is a little bit of both.
And of course,
I have to say, I get where he's coming from with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember being a kid and first discovering Greek mythology, and it is seeing all these amazing names, and some of them are really simple, like Zeus,
right?
And some of them are more complicated, like Poseidon. And it just sort of brings you in with like all these interesting names. I always remember a guy I was in high school with asked a teacher in like English class or something. He was like, how come people in these stories are never named Bob?
Why are they not?
And the teacher was like, because Bob wasn't a name then. It's like that wasn't what they named people. But it's that interesting idea of how these were just sort of normal names. And not people weren't naming their kids Zeus or Poseidon. I get that.
Well, they might have been.
But when you look at like, more complicated, I don't know, names like Anaximander or something like that,
Okay.
It's the idea that these were names that were ordinary names to the ancient Greek, and to us they feel so alien, and that sort of sucks us into this legend. And Tolkien's work has the same feel, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
When you first look at his works and you see these interesting names like Legolas or Galadriel, and you have no idea what these names mean.
No, but they certainly attract you.
Yeah, they certainly attract you, and I guess they do push some people away, but there's a certain kind of person who gets dragged in by that. And I don't know. That's a super cool thing.
It is. Absolutely.
And just as much the idea that like, he says modern conlangs like Esperanto failed because they didn't have myths. I haven't studied modern conlangs as much. Maybe that's a question for Andy Higgins next time he comes on the show. But yeah, that's certainly.
That's one of the reasons why I'm not interested in studying them, though.
Because there's no
they
stories.
Don't have those right.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Languages are spoken by a people.
Yeah,
and a people have a collection of stories. They have a collection of legends and myths.
Right.
And that's what makes a language appealing. I mean, that's you look at a constructed language and it's just like, why would I want to speak that? Why wouldn't I want to speak a language that has a history, that has a richness, that has stories that can be told, that have been told for hundreds or even thousands of years? Of course, that's what I'd rather speak.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what makes those languages like Tolkien's feel more real, doesn't it? The world makes the language more real, just as the language makes the world more real, because that's one of the things we love about Tolkien's world is that it feels so real because it has these languages that have the inconsistency.
There's a mutuality about that. There's this absolute, it feeds each other. And that's the thing. His languages, I mean, Quenya is a conlang, but it's not like those other conlangs because it does have a people and a history. And he tells us about that people and that history. And that's what makes it so appealing.
And the thing about the history
people spend time learning Elvish languages.
Well, that's true. And yet at the same time, that to me is why I have utmost respect for people who learn Quenya, who learn Sindarin.
Yeah.
For me personally, I don't really want to learn Quenya or Sindarin. People have actually asked me, why don't you learn it? Why don't you learn to speak it? And it's because for me, the joy is in studying the history of the language.
Right.
It's like that, that, to use a fancy word, that diachronic view of the language as it develops over time, as opposed to trying to like nail it down in one
and become fluent in it.
And become fluent in it in the way it's spoken at the end of the third age or whatever. To me, it's all about studying the language and how it changes. And man, they did change so much.
And for me, it's about the stories that are in that language. Right? For me, it's about the stories of the people that spoke that language. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's get to the part of this letter that you really want to get to, right?
I'm having too much fun with this because I want to say one more thing.
Fair enough.
And that is when we get to next episode and we talk about Galadriel's Namadie song.
Oh, I cannot wait.
You know, I've read ahead, as I know you have too. And when I was reading that,
we kind of have to.
We do. But when I was reading that poem, I was really really just kind of breaking it down in my head, just like really trying to sit down and understand the language for the first time. And if you know enough about the languages, you can pick out words here and there, and you can understand the syntax, even if you're not fluent in Quenya. You can sort of pick it apart. And
that's right.
And yeah, the joy that comes, you know, you're talking about how the stories are really, it's the love of the stories that make you want to study the languages. Knowing the story behind that and sort of reading the poem is what makes picking apart that language so much fun. So I totally get where you're coming from with that. But anyway, maybe more on that next time.
Maybe. But let's get to that last section of the letter, shall we?
Yeah. I mean, there is just this bombshell at the end about inspiration, because that's really what he's talking about here. The idea that I have long ceased to invent. I don't make up this stuff myself.
Nope.
It comes to me. I wait until I know what happened, and then I write it, or it writes itself. That's really fascinating. And when you look at Tolkien's ideas about subcreation,
right?
I mean, I think that really gives you a sense of what he's talking about there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Till it writes itself.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of authors out there who put a lot of time into a lot of words who would love for their work to write itself. Even half as well as Tolkien's wrote itself.
I tell you, I've spent many national novel writing months, people who do that in the month of November, where you try to write like 50,000 words in the month of November.
Wow.
I've sat down in several of those November events and just sat there trying to write a novel and just wishing it would write itself. So yeah. What a gift that must be.
Wait till I seem to know what really happened. It's a history, and all he's doing is discovering what took place in that history. It's a process of discovery, not invention. Right.
Yeah. So the idea of him as this translator, you know, we've talked a couple of times about the frame narrative.
Right.
And this idea of Tolkien as the translator. He's not the creator of this story. He's just the guy who's transmitting it to us. He really seems to have thought of himself that way. And maybe some of it was a little tongue in cheek, but I don't think it was all tongue in cheek. I think he really did think of himself as transmitting a story that he had discovered. Yeah. And that's super cool.
Yes, it is. Definitely.
Well, and I think that's another thing that contributes to that inner consistency of reality, because in a sense, it was somewhat real to him. You know, I mean, obviously he knew the difference between reality and fantasy, but this stuff felt real to him. And so it comes across as real on the page. It doesn't sound like something somebody just made up.
Yeah.
And maybe it was because it was something he felt he was transmitting. Maybe that's why he was so concerned about making sure that it was right. You know, making sure
every detail was correct. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe that's why he niggled with it so much.
Oh, I love that. Leaf by niggle. Yes, that is why he niggled with it so much. And that's why he made the book as wonderful as it is. And speaking of which, we should get back to the book.
I suppose we should, but that was fun.
It was, wasn't it? But we do love the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, so that's where we're going to head over there.
Yes, we do, and we will. We bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time, but at heart, Alan and I are fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. That's our love.
And as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for the show every week. Now, if you want to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. There we have links to every book that we've mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other stuff on our website, too. Show notes and book links specific to each episode. We got some outtakes up there. We are, I believe, the only Tolkien podcast with a blooper reel. We've got some Prancing Pony Ponderings.
We might be the only Tolkien podcast that needs one.
Probably. But we got Prancing Pony Ponderings up there, and we've got some other little extras, too. You'll also find a link to our online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP, where you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and other PPP gear. So please be sure to check that out.
And now let's join the company as they draw straws to see which one of them has to be in a boat with Frodo.
You say that like it's a bad thing. I bet Frodo's a great boat companion.
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he just sits there quietly fingering the ring and, not saying anything.
Looking all creepy. At least he's not like Pippin, who keeps on rocking back and forth trying to capsize it.
And every time you look at Frodo, for some reason, it just turns into a close-up on his eyes, a la Peter Jackson.
Get off the boat!
Yeah. Nicely played.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and pick up here exactly where we left off the last time. And it's going to be a short passage before we get Sean to read some poetry. The company was arranged in this way. Aragorn, Frodo, and Sam were in one boat. Boromir, Merry, and Pippin in another. And in the third were Legolas and Gimli, who would now become fast friends. In this last boat, most of the goods and packs were stowed. The boats were moved and steered with short-handled paddles that had broad, leaf-shaped blades. When all was ready, Aragorn led them on a trial up the Silverlode. The current was swift, and they went forward slowly. Sam sat in the bows, clutching the sides and looking back wistfully to the shore. The sunlight glittering on the water dazzled his eyes. As they passed beyond the green field of the Tongue, the trees drew down to the river's brink. Here and there, golden leaves tossed and floated on the rippling stream. The air was very bright and still. There was a silence, except for the high distant song of larks. They turned a sharp bend in the river, and there, sailing proudly down the stream towards them, they saw a swan of great size. The water rippled on either side of the white breast beneath its curving neck. Its beak shone like burnished gold, and its eyes glinted like jet set in yellow stones. Its huge white wings were half lifted. A music came down the river as it drew nearer, and suddenly they perceived that it was a ship, wrought and carved with elven skill in the likeness of a bird.
All right.
Good thing they didn't make turkey boats, Sean.
It's,
Can you imagine?
It's just not nearly as elegant.
The waddle would not be an attractive piece at the front of that ship.
It'd be really cool if they did that, and if Celeborn was standing up in the bow of the boat with a turkey call.
All right. There's our joke for the night.
All right, that's been enough silliness. No more
That's
silliness.
right. No more.
Okay, so let's talk about how the company were arranged.
Mm-hmm.
Because the passage starts with a pretty straightforward statement of how
Yeah.
they're arranged. I like that.
Well, we've
The
talked about
company
this
was
before, like when they're going through Moria and we got the order. That was important because if there's
you
an
got to get
encounter,
the order down. Yeah.
you've got to know where they are, right?
Yeah, and let's talk about this because I think it shows
Mhm.
impressive attention to detail. So you've
Yes,
got
it does.
Aragorn, Frodo, and Sam in one boat.
Right.
You got Boromir, Merry, and Pippin in another boat. And then in the third boat, you've got Legolas and Gimli, who are now fast friends. And that's so cool. I'm so glad we
Fast
finally
friends. Yay.
Yeah.
Now we finally get what we've been trying to read into everything before this.
I mean, of course, everybody in the Fellowship is like, well, not fast enough because they've been fighting for the last several months. Several weeks, at least.
I was going to say months might be an overstatement, but okay, fair enough.
It feels like months because we've been talking about it for months.
That is true. That is true.
Let me have that one.
They have been fighting for months in our show.
Exactly. But anyway, yes, the fast friends are in the boat with...
Most of the stuff.
That's right. And here's where I love Tolkien's attention to detail, because he's really distributed the load evenly here. You know, each of the big guys, Aragorn and Boromir, each of them is with two of the little guys, right?
Right.
And then in the third boat, you've got the skinny guy with the short, stocky guy who's heavier.
Mhm.
So, you know, they're the two of them are probably lighter than a man and two hobbits because, you know, hobbits. But
Right.
but they've got the gear. I mean, it really is, and it's the little things, but it really is so evenly distributed. My hat is off to Tolkien. It's like, you remember those brain teasers where it's like, you know, the dad and the two sons are trying to cross the river in the boat? It's like,
yeah.
it's like he's
what this
captured,
is.
he's distilled that into a scene in a fantasy book, and I love that.
Yeah, he really has. That's a good point. I couldn't help but speculate, though, if Gandalf were still here, how would this look? My original thought was, okay, he's not gonna put anybody but himself with Frodo. So it's gonna be Gandalf, Frodo, and that means Sam.
You mean he's not going to put Boromir and Frodo alone in a boat together and send them off where nobody else can see them?
Boromir, would you mind guarding Frodo and the ring? No. So Gandalf, Frodo, and Sam in one boat. Then it would be what? Aragorn with Merry and Pippin? Or maybe Boromir
Probably.
with Merry and Pippin. But probably Aragorn. And then that would mean Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli. But then where do you put the stuff, right?
See, yeah, I think Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli might be too many in one boat. I mean,
I think
Boromir,
so. Boromir's
We've
a
talked
big
about
dude.
it. Boromir's a big dude. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to weigh. I mean, he may be shorter than Aragorn, but I bet he weighs at least as much. Probably
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I'm sure he's a big warrior guy. I mean, he's
Yeah.
and he's also got the shield and everything. He's probably
heavier armor.
He's
Yeah.
probably heavier armored and armed than the others.
Yeah.
If Gandalf were there, maybe they would just skip the boats and call the eagles,
Oh, yeah, of course. Or maybe Celeborn would be like, you know what? I've got 4 boats for you. Not 3, but 4.
Well, that's just going to complicate everything because then it's like somebody's going to have to go alone.
No, I think you
Boromir's
you split Merry and Pippin up. You put Aragorn and Boromir and one of the two, Merry or Pippin. And then you put the other one with Legolas and Gimli.
Well, I guess you could do that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
We're making it up. That's what we do. It's what we do. So let's talk about
It's
the
a
trial
very
run
strange
now,
speculation, but let's continue.
Right? Yeah, let's move on.
Let's
Moving
move
on.
Rather, let's not continue with that. Let's move on.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because now we get to talk about paddles. I mean, ever so briefly, but still.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
a little bit of a trial run here.
Mm-hmm.
They go down the river a bit with short-handled paddles with leaf-shaped blades.
Leaf-shaped blades. I love it.
Yeah. And oh wait, no, I said down the river, but they're actually going up the river, aren't they?
They are
They're
going up.
back up the Silver Lode.
That's right.
So they are moving slowly.
Because if
here,
they went down the Silver Lode, they'd be in the Anduin. It'd be a bye-bye. See you next
Right.
time.
That's
I mean,
right,
they're
yeah.
gone. So no,
exactly. Yeah.
this is a trial run. They're just going up a little bit.
Yep, you're right. I misspoke.
That's okay. We do that. And I let you. It's okay. I forgive you.
Thank you. I appreciate
We
that.
get briefly Sam's perspective, not Frodo's, but Sam's. And of course, that's because he's the one who's afraid. He's the only one here who really, really is not keen on being on the boats.
Yeah, we talk about that epistemic
He's a complete
regime.
novice when it comes to boats.
Yeah, we talk about how we usually see the scene from the person with the least information, right?
Right.
And Sam here has very little information, as in he lacks the information that they're not all going to die right now.
Right now,
And-
as in the next few seconds. Yeah.
Right.
He's clutching.
He
the boat.
really
You can
does
see him
think
now,
they're gonna
totally
die.
white knuckled. He's
Yeah.
just like his arms are cramping because he's squeezing so tight.
Yeah.
Oh man! But I love this really brief description of what we're seeing outside of the boat. I just thought this was so beautiful. This idea of the sunlight glittering on the water, the green field, the trees coming to the river's edge, the golden leaves on the water.
Yeah.
And the silence, except for the high song of what a gorgeous moment that is.
It's
Just
another
had to
one of
kinda
those
push the
very
pause button.
sensory passages. Yeah.
It is.
There's a lot of color.
There is a lot of color.
There's a lot of color,
And
but then there's also the sound, the song of the larks. Yeah, it's a really nice passage.
It is rich. It's very small, but it's dense.
Yeah. And so then they turn this bend in the river,
Yes.
and then they see
Just around the river bend.
Wow. That might be our first Pocahontas reference on the
I
show.
think it might be. It might be. Maybe we can sing though about the colors of the wind. I don't know.
Maybe we can.
We'll save that for the funeral service of Boromir when they talk about the different winds.
Oh, yeah, that might work. It'll make me sad.
There we go. Spoiler: Boromir dies.
I think people might know that.
I know, Sean. I know.
If they
Right.
didn't know the story before, at some point in the last 2 seasons, they've Googled Boromir. They found out he was played by Sean Bean in a movie, and so they know he dies.
Right. because he was played by Sean Bean.
Right,
That's what Tolkien
exactly.
didn't know. You
Right.
wrote a character. He's played by Sean Bean. He's going
It's like
to
Tolkien.
die.
Come on, man. You cast Sean Bean. We all know he's going to die.
Yeah. Just the way it is. All right.
Anyway, so they come around this corner, and they see some freakishly huge swan.
Yes.
That
Maybe
this is
they
like
think it's just closer. I mean, they can't really imagine. I mean, the text really does make it sound like they think this is a real swan.
I'm thinking
right?
fire swamp. It's the SOUSs. The swans of unusual
Oh,
size.
man. I don't believe in them. They don't exist.
And then it attacks.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then it comes right out. Yeah. So truly, for a little while, there's like
Yeah.
a
Maybe
little
a second
bit
or
here.
two. We
It's
don't know.
actually described as a swan. Like
Yeah.
it's this huge swan, not
Right.
as a boat, which of course it turns out to be.
Well, right. And what a beautiful description it is. It really,
Oh, I mean, if this is a giant swan, if you're going to get attacked by a giant swan, this is the giant swan
Well,
to
yeah.
get attacked by.
yeah, that's true. And a giant
it.
swan like this probably will attack you. Yeah, especially if
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
carrying
beak
any
like
bread.
burnished gold. I mean, it's doing some damage with that thing.
Yes, it
Eyes
is.
glinted like jet set in yellow stones. Yeah, it's gorgeous. But
Mhm.
then, as it draws nearer, they hear this music, and then it's like, oh wait, nope, not a
Oh, yeah.
giant swan. It's just a boat.
It's a swan-shaped boat.
It's
It's
totally
funny, though,
just
because
a
that
ship.
description, even though it's beautiful and it describes this gorgeous swan, you realize there are little hints in that description about this being the ship. It talks about the burnished gold. Its beak didn't shine like burnished gold. Its beak is probably burnished gold.
Probably, yeah.
Its eyes glinted like jet set in Yellowstones.
Its eyes
No,
are
its eyes
probably
are
actually jet. Yeah.
set in
Yeah.
Yellowstones. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. So then we get that music. You're right, and that's what gives it away. This is a ship, and it's very much a Tellerin ship, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back all the way to chapter 5 in the Silmarillion, that's of Eldamar and the princes of the Eldalie, we read that their ships, the ships of the Teleri, were made in the likeness of swans with beaks of gold and eyes of golden jet.
That's right. That's right. So this is just like the Tellerin ships of Alqualande. And that's really interesting when you remember that in some of the competing versions of the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, Celeborn was actually not a Sindarin elf of Beleriand, which is what he is in this book, but in some versions he was actually a Tellerin prince of Alqualande. He was actually a grandson of Olwe.
That's right.
And this was something that Tolkien went back and forth on this. In fact, Christopher points out in Unfinished Tales that the making of Celeborn into a Tellerin elf of Aman contradicts not only statements in the Silmarillion, but also The Road Goes Ever On and Appendix B to The Lord of the Rings, where Celeborn is a Sindarin elf of Beleriand, which is why we stick to that version. Again,
right, of course.
We're going with the published version of the story where Celeborn is one of the Sindar. But it is very interesting because clearly this is something Tolkien went back and forth on. And the fact that he put this Tellerin ship here, that is arguably proof of the fact that he was probably, at least for a split second, thinking of that version of the story when he wrote this.
I think so.
And maybe he just decided, well, I'm going to make him one of the Sindar, but I like the ship, so I'm going to leave it there. And that's fine.
Because it is a pretty cool ship, no doubt.
It is. It is. Totally acceptable that he did that, but definite connection back to that other version and back to the first age.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to have you pick up right there, literally in the middle of the paragraph, and you're also going to get to read some, let's face it, almost all, but not quite, just enough to keep us out of copyright court of the song.
All right. 2 elves clad in white steered it with black paddles. In the midst of the vessel sat Celeborn, and behind him stood Galadriel, tall and white. A circlet of golden flowers was in her hair, and in her hand she held a harp, and she sang. Sad and sweet was the sound of her voice in the cool, clear air. I sang of leaves of gold, and leaves of gold there grew. Of wind I sang, a wind there came, and in the branches blew. Beyond the sun, beyond the moon, the foam was on the sea, and by the strand of Ilmarinen there grew a golden tree. Beneath the stars of Evereve in Eldamar it shone, in Eldamar beside the walls of elven Tirion. And I am going to skip a couple of lines in the middle.
2 lines.
And then I'll pick up
Pay
again.
attention, lawyers. We skipped 2 lines.
And then I'm going to pick up with the last 6 lines, and you'll see why I insisted on these 6-line chunks in just a minute. O Lórien, the winter comes, the bare and leafless day. The leaves are falling in the stream, the river flows away. O Lórien, too long I have dwelt upon this hither shore, and in a fading crown have twined the golden Eleanor. But if of ships I now should sing, what ship would come to me? What ship would bear me ever back across so wide a sea?
And it is quite a wide sea, as we'll see. But go ahead and continue, because I've got you reading all the way to the next break.
All right. A little bit more prose here. Aragorn stayed his boat as the swan ship drew alongside. The lady ended her song and greeted them. We have come to bid our last farewell, she said, and to speed you with blessings from our land. Though you have been our guests, said Celeborn, you have not yet eaten with us, and we bid you, therefore, to a parting feast, here between the flowing waters that will bear you far from Lórien. The swan passed on slowly to the Hythe, and they turned their boats and followed it. There, in the last end of Egladil upon the green grass, the parting feast was held. But Frodo ate and drank little, heeding only the beauty of the lady and her voice. She seemed no longer perilous or terrible, nor filled with hidden power. Already she seemed to him, as by men of later days elves still at times are seen, present and yet remote, a living vision of that which has already been left far behind. by the flowing streams of time.
Hmm.
All right.
Wow, that is such a moment.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. I mean, we've got a lot to break down here, so we're going to start back just with them arriving, right? We want to touch on that. We get the two elves steering it. They've got the white clothes, the black paddles. Celeborn seated and Galadriel standing behind him and singing. I don't know. It's just quite a picture, isn't it?
And playing a harp, which is a cool
That's
detail
right.
that I think I
That's
sometimes
right.
forget. Yeah. And then we get the song itself. I mean, there, at the risk of saying what we always say, there is a lot to unpack here. You know, she starts out singing of leaves, and leaves grow. She sings of wind, and a wind comes.
And it's the power of song for creation here. I mean, this is
Yeah.
the act of subcreation, isn't it? She sings of leaves, and leaves grow. She sings of the wind comes. We saw this at the beginning of time. That song
this is harkening back
force.
to Ina Lindale, and
Yes,
obviously she's an elf. She's not one of the Valar, but this is
no.
This is a microcosm of that. This is sort of a symbolic of that, if nothing else.
Yes, it is. And of course, she does sing about this golden tree, but I want to make sure you all know that's not Lórien. I mean, first of all, she didn't create it.
True.
And that much needs to be said. But second, Lórien wasn't in Eldamar. It was on the hill called Ezelohar, outside the western gate of Valmar.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, Hammond and Skull suggest, and I have to say, I think they've convinced me, this is, quote, perhaps symbolic of the life of the elves in the Blessed Realm compared with the winter of their life in mortal lands.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're right on about that. The structure of the poem really bears that out. If you break down the poem, you can actually break the poem down. All right, it's 14 lines.
Yeah.
But if you look closely, you can actually divide it into two sestets, which are groups of 6 lines each, with a couplet between them. Now, I know that there's no actual stanza breaks. It's all presented as one stanza. But the structure of the song is very clearly 6 and 2 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
The first sestet, the first group of 6 lines, is about the Undying Lands. And the second is about the mortal lands of Middle-earth. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But between them is this rhyming couplet. That's the 2 lines that I didn't read that are, there along the golden leaves and then...
Which you just read.
The Elven Tears. No, I'm not going to read it all.
Oh my goodness.
I'm too careful for that.
Right.
That ends with now fall the Elven Tears. Those 2 lines in the middle, that's really a transition point, because if you look at it, those 2 lines mention both places. They mention Aman and they mention Middle-earth. And there is a very clear there and here in those 2 lines.
Exactly.
So there's a very clear transition and breaking point between the first 6 and the last 6. And the leaves are this sort of symbol for life that runs throughout, going back to what Hammond and Skull said. You've got the golden leaves on the tree growing in Valinor, symbolic of the undying nature of that land, because the leaves are still on the tree. Right. And then that contrasts with the last sestet, which is about these leaves falling, which reminds us of the fading nature of Middle-earth and mortal lands.
That's right. Yeah, it's as though Galadriel is longing for the leaves of Valinor. She's really mourning for the fact that she's lost them. I think when you pointed out that there and here, that really is that transition point. And she's looking back at that and really, truly grieving this loss.
Yeah.
There's a real clear recollection of those places, bright and beautiful. And it's countered with this bittersweet nature, really not even bittersweet, just flat out bitter.
Yeah.
Of being here in Middle-earth. As
winter
beautiful as it is.
And bare and leafless. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Now, going back to the first sestet, she talks about Valinor being beyond the sun, beyond the moon.
Yes.
Now, I want to point out here, remember in Tolkien's cosmology, remember that the sun is a second best thing. He says that in letter number 131. So everybody take a drink.
Yeah.
So Valinor is a place that's beyond these second best things. Now, she doesn't say this outright, but I think there's something very symbolic about that. Because if Valinor is beyond second best things, beyond the sun, beyond the moon, that means that by the transitive property, I think, I'm not a mathematician or a logician. I might be a magician, but I'm not a logician. But by the transitive property, if Valinor is beyond the sun, and the sun is the second best thing, and Valinor is also beyond Lothlórien, because it is this unattainable place that she can't reach, then I think that Lothlórien is also a second best thing. And I think that resonates with what we know about the founding of Lothlórien, which we get in places like Unfinished Tales, where it was supposed to be this place that was founded in memory of the West. It was in memory of Valinor. It was in memory of the original gardens of Lórien in the West that inspired it. And we're reminded that, man, this place might be beautiful, but it is just a pale comparison.
It's an echo.
To the
That's
West.
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
A faint echo.
Indeed. And then we get the winter, right? The winter comes. I guess winter is coming. Do we have to go there?
It's too soon for Sean Bean. Don't let Boromir know.
Oh, nice. And we've come full circle. Speaking of which, the passage of time has come full circle. That's really what we're talking about here, isn't it? The winter is a metaphor.
Yeah, it certainly is. You know, we've already established that they're in a mortal land here in Middle Earth. Now they're about to lose even what little time they have, right? Because, you know, winter's coming.
Know. One thing or another. Either Sauron's going to win,
right,
and they're all going to die, or Frodo's going to destroy the ring, and everything they have is going to fade.
Everything's going to fade. And so they, you know, you got to imagine that Galadriel and Celeborn are just longing, more than anything, they're just longing to be able to hold on to this for as long as they can. You know, this last reminder of the leaves of Valinor. It's like, it's hard for us to conceive of because we're mortal. And, you know, we don't live as long as elves do. But imagine having lived thousands of years and now being, you know, near the end of your time in mortal lands. Obviously, we know she's going to go into the West and she's going to stick around a bit longer.
And remain Galadriel.
Nicely done. But imagine, you know, you've been in this place for so long and you know you're finally about to leave it. And it's just, you know, you know, you're not ready to leave yet. You haven't had enough yet. And
that's right.
you just want to hold on to it for a little bit longer, but she's wise enough to know that she can't. And there's just something very beautiful and very sad about that.
Yeah. And then of course we get that famous plea, this whole idea about a ship bearing me across the sea, this desire to return. If of ships I now should sing, right? She's sung about these other things and they've come to be.
Yeah.
But if she sings about ships, they're not going to come to be. That's not going to make them exist.
No. And there's something symbolic about that. It's almost as if she's lost that subcreative power here in these mortal lands. Now, of course, this is all metaphorical territory. It's not, it's not that she ever had the ability to sing leaves into being or wind into being, but it is symbolic of the fact that she's lost something, having been lost in these mortal lands.
She's lost that subcreative feeling?
Yes, that subcreative feeling.
Oh, that subcreative feeling.
Now it's gone.
And now it's gone.
Gone.
Along with our dignity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's just, you know, she's longing for this thing she's lost. She's longing for these leaves of Valinor. And it's just, again, she's come to the end and she hasn't had enough. It's like, she can't get enough of your leaves.
Oh, man. That is good stuff right there, Sean. Little Bad Company subtle reference.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad she sang this song instead, but still, you know, that's the other song.
I can't imagine her singing the other one.
No.
Or even Rock and Roll Fantasy for that matter. Well, there's that one there.
No, Rock and Roll Fantasy could have been the name of this podcast, though.
It could have been. You know, in a way, it really has been, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
Yeah. But so here's the thing. Even if she could sing this ship into existence, this taxi ain't taking her where she wants to go.
No, that's true. I mean, they couldn't take her across a sea. Well, it's not even a sea at all anymore, is it? We kind of hinted at that.
It's just the air. Yeah,
right. I mean, it's the straight road. It's really,
right.
It's going straight and the earth is bent. So it's going off into space, basically. And Tolkien
second star to the right, straight on until morning, you know?
Right, exactly.
I mean, Valinor, Neverland, I mean, they're both sort of the same idea. It's the straight road.
And there's a pirate with a hook hand waiting for her, and a crocodile.
And a boy who wouldn't grow up. His name is Fëanor.
And a boy who wouldn't grow up.
All right, man, there's more truth
who would
to that
win
than
in
I
a fight
thought.
between Galadriel and Tinkerbell? Never mind, Galadriel.
No, I don't. Well, Tink wins most of her fights, but I do think Galadriel might.
Tink's a scrapper. Yeah.
But Galadriel has the reach advantage. Let's be clear.
She does. Yeah. I don't want to sell Tink short.
Oh,
Tink has got speed.
She does. She's agile.
She does.
All right.
But come on.
Boy, this is good stuff.
Anyway. Well, and not only is the road straight, and not only is it not even a sea anymore, but she can't go back. I mean, remember, we talked about the ban on the Noldor back in episode 167. We did the sidebar on Galadriel, and we talked about again, a few different versions, as there frequently are with Galadriel.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but at the time of writing this, then that idea of a ban was firmly in place. She could not go back. She was not allowed back.
No, she was not. Not at this point. Not yet, at least.
Right.
And then we get to this farewell feast. I love this. Celeborn's like, though you've been our guest, you've not yet eaten with us. Not because we didn't want to. You never invited us, man.
Right. Was there a dinner? Because we didn't hear about it.
We didn't get the invite.
And then Celeborn's like, oh, I just figured you guys were busy,
Yeah. Busy
Yeah.
doing what? Asking about
Right.
rope classes? Because I didn't get that memo either, says Sam. Yeah.
Again, the Yelp reviews for this place are just really tanking right now.
Yeah, apparently
Like-
they have really great service, but you have to know what's happening.
Right,
There's
yeah.
no concierge. There's no written nothing. There's nothing.
Nobody knows what's going on there.
No. And none of them speak your language. Except on the last day, when it comes time to deliver your bill, then they all speak your language.
Oh, yeah, of course, they're right there. When it's checkout time, they're right there to see you along.
Can I help you
Yeah.
carry your bag, sir?
Yeah.
Let me get you out of here, sir.
Totally.
Yeah. All right.
So,
the swan ship passes and heads to the Hive. Now, we talked about the Hive last episode, I think it was, when we introduced that word. Did a little word nerdery on that.
we did.
That's
Yep.
just this docking area for the boats. So, and then the company follows, and then they have the feast.
Oh, this feast on the green grass. It's a lovely little picnic, really.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Picnic might be an understatement, but yeah.
Oh, it's a lovely, a lovely big picnic. How about that?
Just because it's on grass, I don't know that it makes it a picnic.
It's the best picnic ever. Come on. It's a great picnic.
Hey, boo-boo. Don't let the ranger get to the picnic baskets.
It's a wonderful feast there on the grass. But
Yes.
then Frodo, Frodo isn't really hungry. He's not eating or
No.
drinking much. He's captured by Galadriel's beauty and voice, and I love this description that we get of her.
Yeah, I agree. The no longer perilous, not filled with hidden power, and this line about that she seemed lesser now, that she's present and yet remote. Oh,
Yeah,
it is a lovely vision. Really
it
is.
is. Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit about what we read at the end of the Mirror of Galadriel and how she seemed shrunken. Remember that?
How she just seemed like
It's the
a
same sort of
simple
thing.
elf woman at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it kind of reminds me of how we talk about these flowing streams of time that are right at the end
Yeah.
of the passage that I read. And
I love that.
it just reminds me of so much we've seen throughout Lothlórien, this idea
Mhm.
of different streams of time,
Right.
and I think it's,
And how Tolkien at one point had 1 day equals 20. It
Yeah.
was going to be
yeah,
some
he
time
was going to make it
past.
very literal, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Very
Yeah.
slowly flowing stream of
Yeah.
time.
And he sort of moved away from that, which I think is good. I think it makes
Yeah.
Lothlórien more of a real place. But
Yeah.
but he manages to have it both ways by having it sort of in this time bubble, in real time, and yet still somehow another place. And I think that's super cool. And
Exactly. They still sense
Yeah.
the flowing stream of time differently, but
Yeah.
it still gets around them. Yeah.
And you know what else is sometimes left behind by the flowing streams of time?
I don't know, Sean.
Lost socks.
Yes, they are.
So we're going to remind you where to get some good socks. Bombas.
Yes, that we will. Now, Bombas, honestly, they do make the most comfortable socks in the history of feet. They have literally rethought every detail of the socks that we wear to make them infinitely more comfortable.
Yeah, they have. Alan and I have been wearing Bombas socks now for several months, ever since they first started supporting the show.
Mhm.
And I love just how amazingly comfortable they are.
Yeah.
There's an attention to detail there. There's style, the quality. And, oh yeah, did I mention the comfort? Because they're really comfortable.
They really are. I mean, they're my only running socks now for that exact reason. But the thing is that Bombas socks do more than just keep our feet cozy and warm.
Yeah.
For every pair of socks you buy, Bombas donates a pair to somebody in need. Every pair. That's 34 million pairs and counting through a network of more than 3,000 partners.
And that impact is now more powerful than ever.
Yeah.
For those experiencing homelessness, these socks give them the comfort and dignity of putting on clean clothes.
Mhm.
It's a small comfort, but it's one that's really important, especially right now.
Yeah.
So give a pair when you buy a pair and get 20% off your first purchase at bombas.com/PPP.
Now that's BOMBAS.com/PPP for 20% off your first purchase. Bombas.com/PPP. Now let's go ahead and get back into the story.
All right.
After that, I thought fantastic segue, by the way. I mean, really, I hope Bombas enjoyed that.
I hope so.
The flowing streams of time
the flowing
and the lost
streams
socks.
of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Either that or my dryer, one or the other, but there was no dryer in
That too.
the chapter. So, you know.
That too.
So I'm going to go ahead and pick up exactly where you left off. This is Celeborn's geography lesson. After they had eaten and drunk, sitting upon the grass, Celeborn spoke to them again of their journey, and, lifting his hand, he pointed south to the woods beyond the tongue. As you go down the water, he said, you will find that the trees will fail, and you will come to a barren country. There the river flows in stony vales amid high moors, until at last, after many leagues, it comes to the tall island of the Tyndrock, that we call Tolbrandir. There it casts its arms about the steep shores of the isle, and falls then with a great noise and smoke over the cataracts of Rauros down into the Nindalf, the Wetwang, as it is called in your tongue. That is a wide region of sluggish fen, where the stream becomes tortuous and much divided. There the Etwash flows in by many mouths from the forest of Fangorn in the west. About that stream, on this side of the great river, lies Rohan. On the further side are the bleak hills of the Emyn Muil. The wind blows from the east there, for they look out over the dead marshes and the no-man lands to Cirith Gorgor and the black gates of Mordor. Boromir, and any that go with him seeking Minas Tirith, will do well to leave the great river above Rauros, and cross the Entwash before it finds the marshes. Yet they should not go too far up that stream, nor risk becoming entangled in the forest of Fangorn. That is a strange land, and is now little known, but Boromir and Aragorn doubtless do not need this warning. Indeed, we have heard of Fangorn and Minas Tirith, said Boromir, but what I have heard seems to me for the most part old wives' tales, such as we tell to our children. All that lies north of Rohan is now to us so far away that fancy can wander freely there. Of old, Fangorn lay upon the borders of our realm, but it has now many lives of men since any of us visited it, to prove or disprove the legends that have come down from distant years.
All right. Well, going back to the beginning of the passage you read, Celeborn giving a little bit of a geography lesson here.
Right.
Explaining how as they go south along the Anduin, they'll enter a barren, treeless land. And then on after many leagues to the Tyndrock. You'll understand why I pronounce it that way in just a moment, why Alan pronounced it that way. Also known as Tall Brandir, and then we'll get to the Falls of Rauros.
Yes, we will. Now, a little word nerdery on Tyndrock from the nomenclature, where Tolkien describes it as the common speech name, not a translation, of Tol Brandir, the steep, inaccessible island of towering rock at the head of the Falls of Rauros. It contains the old word tynd, a spike, which if it had survived would have rhymed with find, etc. But it now appears as tine, T-I-N-E, prong, with the loss of D.
That's right.
Like on a fork. Yeah.
Right. And obviously, in Old English, it would not have been pronounced tind. That would have happened after the Great Vowel Shift, if that word had survived, which it didn't quite survive.
Which it didn't.
I think we're right to pronounce it Tyndrock instead of Tindrock here. I think the long I.
I think so too. Otherwise, you're going to start thinking about, do I swipe left on this island or swipe right on this island?
Tindrock. That's terrible.
It is terrible.
Also, on the short vowel versus the long vowel, should we talk about nomenclature? Because we've apparently been saying nomenclature a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's my Latin training creeping in. I don't know why I have kind of a mental block on that word, but yes, it is nomenclature. We had a listener reach out to us recently and say, come on, guys, it's nomenclature, not nomenclature. So,
you're right.
Sorry about that. For some reason, I thought it was one of those words that could go both ways, but I'm totally wrong about that.
No.
Although I think our British listeners would pronounce it nomenclature. So
nomenclature? That's okay. They also say aluminium.
They do.
And I don't know where the extra syllable comes from. Because
in
our version of English,
I don't want to start that fight, really.
No, I don't either. I would probably just pronounce it that way because I like the way the English pronounce things.
Yeah, which is why we say things like bad instead of bade.
Yeah, he bade him farewell. Right?
Yeah. So, but I'm not going to go with nomenclature. Sorry, I can't do that. But I will correct myself and say nomenclature. I'll try to do that.
Fair enough.
And not think of it as nomenclature. I don't know why. It's just one of those things.
Nom, nom.
Nom, nom. Thinking of the nominative case. All the Latin nerds out there will get that one.
Because that's not the nominative case.
Right. Anyway, a little bit more word nerdery, not on Tyndrock, but on its Sindarin name, Tall Brandir. This is translated as Isle of the Great Steeples. It is not named after the character Brandir of Brethil, who you may remember from the First Age, Children of Húrin.
That's right.
Brandir's name actually means lofty man or noble man. That's in the etymologies in The Lost Road, History of Middle-earth, Volume 5. It's not named after him, but the words may actually be related because that Sindarin word branda, meaning lofty, does appear
Okay.
to be related to a lot of words that express height, but also size or like sort of figurative size or majesty.
Okay. Okay.
So I think that's where you get the idea of a lofty or noble man. But it's the
Sure.
same root that is the source of words like barad, meaning tower,
Ah,
and
yeah.
presumably Brandir, meaning great steeples. So I think they're all probably related.
Okay.
But again, not named after Brandir himself.
No. And then we get in the geography lesson, we get into the Wetwang, the Nindalf, which is a
Mhm.
fen that's fed by the
Mhm.
Entwash from Fangorn Forest.
That's right. And I guess a
You
little
got
bit more
some
word
word nerdery
nerdery
on
here.
that? Good.
Yeah, on Wetwang, also from the nomenclature. There, Tolkien tells us that this is a common speech translation of Nindalf, Sindarin, Nin, meaning wet, plus Talf, Talf, meaning flat field. And the T
Huh.
changes to a D because
Oh,
of
no.
lenition.
Lenition. Say it with me, folks.
Exactly.
Lenition.
Lenition.
Nice.
So, Nin plus Talf equals Nindalf. But it is in archaic form, the translation is, Wetwang, wang being an old word for field or flat area. And then Tolkien goes on to say, Wetwang is an actual place name in Yorkshire.
All right. Well, Rohan is on both sides of the Entwash. Now, we'll get some more word nerdery on the Entwash itself, but we'll save that for when we see it directly next season. Geographically, the Entwash comes from the southeast corner of Fangorn, and it parallels the Anduin for a bit in sort of that north-south line.
Right,
But then it turns east and heads to the fens below Raura.
right. Then going back to Celeborn's geography lesson, on the opposite side of Anduin from the Entwash, he tells us that's where the Aemon Muil is,
Mm-hmm.
and those look over the Dead Marshes and the No Man Lands to the gates of Mordor.
Yeah. Boy, was that no man land.
That's a powerful word, isn't it?
It is a very
Coming
powerful
from a World War I
word.
veteran. Yeah.
That is absolutely what I'm thinking. I mean, he doesn't quite use the same phrase, but it really is the same phrase.
It's
isn't it?
totally the same word, even though it's not exactly the same
It's
form.
not hyphenated quite the same, but yeah.
Right. Yep.
Then we get this advice from Celeborn, which in and of itself is surprising because he's giving advice.
I know. Right. What is up with him? He's slipping.
But let's be clear. This is more like stating the obvious. If you're going to go to Minas Tirith, you probably should leave the river before it descends the 1,000-foot fall and crushes you to your death on sharp rocks beneath.
Solid
Okay.
shout that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's really thanks for the obvious.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to go to LA and you're going to LA from San Francisco and you're on the 5, you should probably leave the freeway before you get to Mexico. Yeah, kind of. I mean, really, that's sort of the point. So anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, cross the Entwash before the marshes. But then he does give some actual useful advice. Don't go too far up that river and end up in Fangorn. It's a strange land, says Celeborn.
Says the guy who's thousands of years old and lives with a nuclear fairy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's a strange land.
Yes, it is. This is normal. That's right? Really strange.
Yeah. The time bubble with the gold and silver trees where people live on wooden platforms among the branches.
Right, exactly. But that's perfectly normal.
That's pretty
Fangorn
standard
place,
issue.
It is
but
strange.
Fangorn's weird. Yeah. But it does kind of stress. I mean, it is, although we can joke about it and it is fun to joke about, it's true. If he says it's a strange land, man, it's got to be a strange land.
Right. Well, and his point is that it's now little known. Right. Yeah. We know very little about this place. You think we're isolated. Fangorn is really isolated.
Yeah.
It is little known.
And it is quite possible that is the primary meaning of strange in that sense. Remember, we've talked about...
That's a very good point. Yeah, when we talked about...
It can mean foreign. It can mean estranged.
Yeah.
It could be that's what he's saying more than like it's uncanny
unusual,
or it's weird. Yeah.
Or bizarre.
Unusual, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think actually that makes more sense. That interpretation of it fits. It's not as funny, but it fits, and I think it makes more sense.
It could be both. I'm not saying it's necessarily one or the other, but
it's little known. We don't know anything about this place. We don't have any spies there. We don't have any information gathering going on in the forest of Fangorn, and Boromir and Aragorn don't need to know that.
Right, and Boromir confirms, like, oh yeah, I've totally heard of that place. We've talked about Fangorn and Minas Tirith before. It's all old wives' tales, the kind of stuff we tell to kids.
Right.
But, he says it's a land beyond our memory. It's a place that they don't go anymore, and so imagination can kind of run wild when you're
I love
talking
that
about
line.
that place.
It's
Yeah,
so far
yeah,
away that
fancy
fancy can wander freely there.
Yeah.
That's well said, Boromir, I have to say.
Yeah, it's a nice way of saying people can just make stuff up about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, then he goes on, I guess this is actually after the passage that you read, where he talks about
Right.
his journey north,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of talking about going through Rohan. He's never crossed it northwards, but he actually went west through the Gap of Rohan and so forth. And
Right.
he's confident that he'd find a way home if he had to.
Mm-hmm. And Celeborn basically acknowledges that. Looks, well, then I guess I don't need to tell you anything more. But he does give one more little piece of wisdom. Don't despise old lore or old wives' tales. The unspoken part is there. Also, don't despise old wives, for that matter, I would think. But yeah, it's some good counsel.
Says the guy who's been married to the nuclear fairy for thousands of years. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And Hammond and Skull do us a really great service by reminding us that on many occasions in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien shows that the traditional lore of simple people or of children may have as much validity as the learning of lore masters. On fairy stories, he comments that one reason why fairy stories are associated with children is that they were told to them by their nurses, quote, who were sometimes in touch with rustic and traditional lore, forgotten by their betters.
Well, speaking of teaching children traditional lore, see what we did there with another segue, we want to remind you about our friends at Little Passports.
Yeah, with schools closed for who knows how long, and distance learning the new normal, we're still looking for ways to make learning fun and interactive for our kids, and we know many of you are doing the same. That's why we want to introduce you to Little Passports.
That's right. Now, textbooks and worksheets are helpful, but let's be honest, they're just not always that exciting. Instead, Sean and I have been bringing education to life for our kids with Little Passports.
The Science Expeditions Pack has been exactly what I hoped it would be, including the make-your-own slime thing, which my kids are really into.
Of course they do.
Yeah,
I've been getting to spend some time traveling during the lockdown via the USA edition, which covers every state. Fact is, there are boxes for every kid.
Yeah, there really are. And for $12.95 a month, there is a ton of stuff to explore, right in your own home, with Little Passports.
Mm-hmm. And now, just for our listeners, Little Passports is offering 15% off the price of any subscription. That means your child could be flying rockets or looking through a microscope in no time.
That's right. You'll want to use offer code PPP at checkout for 15% off your order. That's PPP at littlepassports.com.
And now it's time to unpack some loot boxes with Galadriel.
Oh, I like what you did there.
Awesome segues.
No, that's brilliant. In and out. Wonderful.
There you go. We should get a bonus for that one. All right. I'm going to go ahead and have you read this next little bit here about the Cup of Parting.
All right. Now Galadriel rose from the grass, and taking a cup from one of her maidens, she filled it with white mead and gave it to Celeborn. Now it is time to drink the cup of farewell, she said. Drink, Lord of the Galadhrim, and let not your heart be sad, though night must follow noon, and already our evening draweth nigh. Then she brought the cup to each of the company, and bade them drink in farewell. But when they had drunk, she commanded them to sit again on the grass, and chairs were set for her and for Celeborn. Her maidens stood silent about her, and awhile she looked upon her guests. At last she spoke again. We have drunk the cup of parting, she said, and the shadows fall between us. But before you go, I have brought in my ship gifts which the Lord and Lady of the Galadhrim now offer you in memory of Lothlórien. Then she called to each in turn.
And said, will you take what's behind door number 1? No, I'm kidding.
No, she's bringing out all the big Christmas
very
packages.
Very personalized gifts.
The bows.
She's not forgotten who gets what.
That's right.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about
Most of the gifts are personalized, not all of them.
No, not all of them. Some of them are very generic, and we'll get to those. Like, what did Boromir get? I don't remember. Whatever it was, it took like 4 words, and we were on to something else. But that's okay. He's going to die anyway. So,
hey,
the Cup of Farewell.
That hurts.
Well,
man,
it's Sean Bean. What are you going to expect?
I know, but man,
I know.
Boromir got the belt buckle. Remember the bit? Well, it's a belt, right? But I'm just imagining like the big belt buckle with like the Gondor tree on it, kind of like a big Texan belt buckle.
I was just thinking, since I was thinking of the belt itself, just some nice 1.5 inch wide black leather strap, just really solid.
Sure.
Meaty.
But no, man, it's got the big buckle, the one that you could like take the belt off and you can use it as a weapon because the buckle's so heavy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Chad in Texas knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, of course, he's Chad in Texas.
I can say that because I live in Texas too. Okay, I have
know.
7 of those belts.
Nicely done. Well, let's get back to the story here. We actually get the farewell cup. We should say farewell to this line of reasoning, but we get the cup of farewell, and it's filled with white mead. And
yeah,
what does she do with it first?
Well, she offers it to Celeborn first.
That's right.
He is the Lord. She offers it to him first.
Right.
And she does make a very somber statement, as many of her statements this chapter have been, about their evening drawing near. You know, this is another reference to that long defeat, which we talked about in the previous chapter, and that we were just talking about a little while ago, about the fact that they're fading and that their time is almost ended in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
You know, she says our evening draws near. It's code, you know, it's like our time is almost past. Yeah.
This is symbolic language, no doubt.
Yeah. And then in this very ritual seeming sense, and I know you're going to talk about that in just a moment.
Yeah.
You know, having offered the mead to the Lord, she then offers it to the guests.
Yeah, she does. And that looks like a reference to Beowulf, really. And I want to point that out. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I asked you specifically. So what does she do with the farewell cup? Well, she offers it to the Lord first. And then you pointed out the whole idea about the long defeat. Mm-hmm. And then it being given to the guests. And it totally made me think Beowulf. And sure enough, there's a scene that's very much like this. Now there, Hrothgar's queen, and I'm still going to probably butcher this, even though I've already practiced, Wealhtheow, offered the cup to the king and then to the guests. Now I want to look at Tolkien's translation at line 962. Then spake the Lady of the Shieldings, receive now this cup, dear lord of mine, giver of rich gifts. She then offered the cup to Beowulf, and in other translations to the others in the hall. So we've got a queen offering a cup first to her king, a king who is noted as a giver of gifts, and then in turn to their guests.
Yep. Beowulf, definitely a Beowulf reference. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's a good call out that it comes with this reference to their evening drawing near, to this long defeat, because we've been so much in fairy story territory here.
Right.
It's interesting to see us back in Beowulf territory. But
I agree.
But like many things, it's there's the contrast of the light and the dark in Lothlórien. So very cool. And then she prepares for the gifts, right? So the company sits on the grass. Galadriel and Celeborn get chairs because, you know, their place.
Well, because they're the Lord and Lady, right? Y'all sit on the ground. We're going to get the
You guys can sit on the ground. Grandma and Grandpa are going to sit on chairs. The kids can sit on the floor while we pass out presents, just like everybody else's Christmas. Yeah.
We're thousands of years old. We don't want to have to try to get up from the ground if we don't have to.
No, not at all. So Galadriel and Celeborn sitting on chairs. Galadriel's got her maidens all around her. This reference to, okay, so we've drunk the cup of parting. So there's something ritual about that. That's an important part of saying farewell. And then we get this bit about the shadows fall between us. Yeah. What do you make of that?
I think this is that once they leave Lórien, she's not going to be able to have this close mental undressing, if you will, right? I mean, look at a moment ago. A while she looked upon her guests. What do you think was going on there? The same sort of thing that we get at the beginning when they first encounter
100%,
her.
Yeah.
Where she's examining their hearts and she's kind of rummaging around in the closets of their brain. And here she's doing the same thing. But when they leave, she won't be able to do that anymore. The shadows will fall between us. We will no longer be close enough for me to do that. That's kind of how I read it. But also just the shadow of time. You know,
that's kind of what I was thinking. Just, once they leave Lothlórien, they are going to be back in regular time. And I know we can't really pin down exactly what's different about Lórien time, but there is a barrier there. There's some sort of
there is.
There's some sort of boundary that's crossed. And once they cross back into the regular world, they are going to be separated from Lothlórien, and they're only going to have their memories of the place. And that's kind of where I was going with it. It's that shadow of memory. And I think that resonates with her saying that we're now going to give you these gifts in memory of Lórien.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just the gifts are going to be a little something tangible you can hold on to. You know, it's like that token that you take back out of fairy to prove that you were there.
Yeah, like the little star on your forehead.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of Smith & Wooten Major there.
That's right. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up after this. We're going to get to some of the gifts. We're going to actually, folks, I know they're going to be so disappointed to hear that we're not going to get through all the gifts tonight. No, we're not. We're going to save some of these for the third chapter, or the third episode in this chapter. So, here is the gift of Celeborn and Galadriel to the leader of your company, she said to Aragorn, and she gave him a sheath that had been made to fit his sword. It was overlaid with a tracery of flowers and leaves, wrought of silver and gold, and on it were set in elven runes formed of many gems the name Anduril and the lineage of the sword. "The blade that is drawn from this sheath shall not be stained or broken, even in defeat," she said. "But is there aught else that you desire of me at our parting? For darkness will flow between us, and it may be that we shall not meet again, unless it be far hence upon a road that has no returning." And Aragorn answered, "Lady, you know all my desire, and long held in keeping the only treasure that I seek. Yet it is not yours to give me, even if you would, and only through darkness shall I come to it." "Yet maybe this will lighten your heart," said Galadriel, "for it was left in my care to be given to you should you pass through this land." Then she lifted from her lap a great stone of a clear green, set in a silver brooch that was wrought in the likeness of an eagle with outspread wings. And as she held it up, the gem flashed like the sun shining through the leaves of spring. "This stone I gave to Celeborn, my daughter, and she to hers. And now it comes to you as a token of hope. In this hour take the name that was foretold for you, Elisar, the elf stone of the house of Elendil." Then Aragorn took the stone and pinned the brooch upon his breast, and those who saw him wondered, for they had not marked before how tall and kingly he stood, and it seemed to them that many years of toil had fallen from his shoulders. "For the gifts that you have given me, I thank you," he said. "O Lady of Lórien, of whom were sprung Celeborn and Arwen Evenstar, what praise could I say more?" The lady bowed her head, and she turned then to Boromir, and to him she gave a belt of gold, and to Merry and Pippin she gave small silver belts, each with a clasp wrought like a golden flower. To Legolas she gave a bow such as the Galadhrim used, longer and stouter than the bows of Mirkwood, and strung with a string of elf hair. With it went a quiver of arrows. Oh, yeah. All right, so now it's time to talk about these gifts, man. This is kind of a moment we've been waiting for, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's one of those iconic moments of the book.
It really is.
And it's almost like Leia giving the medals at the end of New Hope. You know, there's just like something very satisfying about the heroes getting these gifts.
Unless
sorry,
you're Chewbacca.
Chewie. Yeah, I know.
I know, thank you. I was like, wait a minute. Only unless you're Chewbacca. All right.
Yeah. But just like Leia going first to Han and Luke, Galadriel goes first to Aragorn. She goes first to the leader.
Yes, she does. That's right.
And, to be fair, her future grandson-in-law. And the gift that she gives him is a sheath for his sword, for Anduril. And it's got this tracery of flowers and leaves silver and gold, of course, because that is the official
the theme colors of, that's right. Yeah. And then the runes in gems. How gorgeous is that?
Yeah. Pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. And telling a story, too, because, it's telling the lineage of the sword in runes.
That's right. And what a lineage this sword has, too.
Absolutely, yeah. We've talked about that before, but,
yes, we have.
Going all the way back to Narsil. And, oh, wait, it's actually in the next book, isn't it, when Aragorn gives the whole lineage of the sword?
Yes,
right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, I'll save that for when we get there.
That'll be fun. That'll be a good one.
But she tells him that, any sword that's pulled from this sheath will not be stained or broken. And Hammond and Skull actually point out that this idea of sort of a power being in the sheath of a sword recalls the sheath of King Arthur's sword Excalibur, said by Merlin to be worth far more than the sword itself, for it will protect its bearer from injury. So we don't often talk about Arthurian influences in Tolkien, but there are a few of them out there, and I think I'm glad that Hammond and Skull pointed that one out for us, because I don't think I would have picked up on that.
No, I'm not sure that I would have either. But I love what she does next, though. She says, "Is there anything else you want?" I've already given you this amazing thing that's magical in the sense that it's going to protect your sword. But is there anything else that I can do for you? And boy, you know where this is going. And Aragorn, of course, he brings up Arwen without saying Arwen.
Yeah.
You know what I want. You know who I want.
Yeah.
But she's not yours to give. It's not up to you.
Yeah. And Galadriel, seeming to change the subject, but not really, which we'll get
That's
into.
right. That's right. Only I think the uninformed observer is she changing the subject.
Right. Seeming to, saying, oh, well, maybe this will lighten your heart. And you're thinking,
Right,
oh,
here,
well,
let me distract you.
here,
Shiny.
let me, right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's not a laser pointer distracting him from what he's really thinking about. This is
Right.
actually relevant.
Very, very relevant.
And she says, I gave this to Celeborn, my daughter. And she gave it to hers, who we know, of course, is Arwen.
That's right.
And now I'm giving it to you. And so now's the time for you to take this name Elisar, the elf stone.
I love that. That's a chills moment right there. Take the name that was foretold for you.
Yeah.
This is the moment, Aragorn. This is the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these results, I mean, look at what happens. He's tall and kingly. The years of toil just fall from his shoulders. This is a man who's renewed.
Yeah. Yeah. He's coming into his own as the future king of Gondor, as Elendil's heir.
This is really that moment, isn't it? This is when he stops becoming, well, I was going to say it's the moment he stops doubting. That's not true, right? We get to the breaking of the fellowship, and we get to, his whole back and forth about not knowing whether he's made the right decision.
Yeah, he continues to doubt, but not to doubt himself so much. He kind of doubts his decisions and things like that, but he never doubts who he is. He never doubts that he has a right to the throne of Elendil.
Right.
And
to the sword, to wield the sword into the throne. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we see here.
I agree.
There's not that put aside the ranger, become who you were born to be. There's not that moment.
No, there's not that.
But this is one of the many moments where he kind of puts it on and he feels more comfortable. Far from feeling less comfortable as Elendil's heir, he actually feels more comfortable when he can be Elendil's heir. It empowers him.
Yes, it does.
It gives him confidence, and it's a very cool moment.
And I love the thanks that he gives. Well, I mean, I can't thank you enough, of course, right? I want to thank you, but here's proof of how amazing you are. From you were sprung Celebrian and Arwen. I can't say anything better than that.
Yeah, best grandmother-in-law ever.
Boy, you're not kidding. Pretty good to have around for the holidays. Makes really good bread, from what I understand.
She gives the best gifts. She always bakes her bread.
Grandma, did you make some bread for Christmas, for Easter, or whatever, for Thanksgiving? Of course I did. That's what I do.
Of course she did. That's what she does.
She's the grandma.
She's the lady.
Bread. She is.
She's the Hlafdia.
Hlafdia. Oh, yes. That was some serious, 17th level word nerdery right there. Last episode.
It was a fun one.
That was. So now it's time for our Elisar sidebar.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at two sets of passages here in this sidebar on the Elisar given to Aragorn. The first group of text is from Unfinished Tales, and there we are given this backstory of the Elisar. A jewelsmith in Gondolin named Enerthil, who was the greatest jewelsmith of the Noldor after Feanor's death, crafted this original Elisar. The quote is, "It came into his heart to make a jewel within which the clear light of the sun should be imprisoned, but the jewel should be green as leaves." Now, this gem ended up giving power to heal. Here's one of the lines from that. "The hands of one who held it brought to all that they touched healing from hurt." Now, in this story, Enerthil gave it to Idril, who in turn gave it to Eärendil, who healed Mini at Sirion's haven and then took it with him when he left Middle-earth.
That's right. And now that you just said that about Eärendil, I'm just realizing why this is a token of hope. She says this is a token of hope when she gives it to him. So that's cool. I hadn't picked up on that before. But anyway, going back to the brooch and its history. Later, when in ages after there was again an Elisar, we're told that there are two possible origins of this later Elisar. Though which is true, only those wise could say who now are gone. Now, the first possible origin is that the second, later Elisar was actually the first one. It was actually the same one that had been perhaps returned by the grace of the Valar and carried back to Middle-earth by, interestingly, none other than Lórien, whom we know better as Gandalf.
That's right.
In this story, he brought it to Galadriel and said, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to do my Gandalf voice, "This I bring to you from Yavanna. Use it as you may, and for a while you shall make the land of your dwelling the fairest place in Middle-earth." However, he tells her that she won't get to keep it. She has to hand it on at the right time. He says, "For before you grow weary, and at last forsake Middle-earth, one shall come who is to receive it, and his name shall be that of the stone. Elisar he shall be called.
Yes. Now, I like that version of the story, but the other one's good too. This other origin is that Celebrimbor made it for Galadriel prior to them being diluted by Sauron, and that it was almost as good as the original. More subtle and clear was the green gem that he made than that of Enerthil, but yet its light had less power. Radiant nonetheless was the Elisar of Celebrimbor, and he set it within a great brooch of silver in the likeness of an eagle rising upon outspread wings. Now, when she wore it, all things grew fair, but after she received Nenya, she gave it to her daughter Celebrian, who married Elrond. From her it went to Arwen and then to Aragorn.
Right. Now, whether the Elisar that Aragorn receives here is the original one that was made in Gondolin and that was worn by Eärendil and brought back from Valinor by Mithrandir, which is the story I want to go with too.
I know, me too.
Because it's just too cool.
Yeah.
Or whether it's a copy made by the same smith who crafted the 3 rings and then was turned into a pincushion, it is a powerful symbol.
Oh, no,
And
no.
I know, it's still too soon. Poor Celebrimbor.
It's the Celebrimbor law, though. We have to.
Yeah. But it is, either way, it's a powerful symbol, and it's just a wonderful example of the rich detail in the backstories that Professor Tolkien created. Even for things that he wasn't sure we'd ever be able to read. You know,
right. Unfinished Tales.
He had no reason to believe any of that stuff was going to be published.
No.
But there it was, and I think that's, again, it all contributes to that inner consistency of reality.
Absolutely,
but
it does.
I think there's one more thing we want to say about this, and for that we're going to have to go to another source, and we're going to see yet another angle on this story that's going to make it even better.
Agreed. And talk about, more of that inner consistency of reality and the stuff that never would have seen the light of day if it weren't for Christopher. Yep. We're going to look at laws and customs among the Eldar again. Now, this is found in Morgoth's Ring. That's the 10th volume of the History of Middle-earth. We've looked into this a lot over the course of the show, though mostly, I think, in Season 1. But here's the relevant parts of the Elisar. Among the Noldor also, it was a custom that the bride's mother should give to the bridegroom a jewel upon a chain or collar. These gifts were sometimes given before the feast. Thus, the gift of Galadriel to Aragorn, since she was in place of Arwen's mother, was in part a bridal gift, an earnest of the wedding that was later accomplished. This is the sort of richness of detail, that interweaving of customs and traditions and histories and legends that just makes Tolkien's world come alive, just pop right off the page. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the stuff that makes Galadriel the best grandmother-in-law ever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's also look ahead. We got one more thing to talk about here, and we want to look ahead to the houses of healing and the fulfillment of a prophecy. Remember that the people of Minas Tirith, and I'm quoting from that later chapter, named him Elfstone because of the green stone that he wore. And so the name which it was foretold at his birth that he should bear was chosen for him by his own people.
Man, that's great stuff.
Power of prophecy.
All ties together.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And I love that we have all of that time on Aragorn and his gift, and then Boromir gets a belt of gold. Next. I mean, just dismissed. Maybe it should have been a mirror for him to look deep into his own soul.
You get paragraphs and paragraphs on the first one, and then it's like, a
clause. Just
boom,
a simple
here's your
phrase.
belt of gold.
Because Merry and Pippin, they spend more time on the Hobbit's gifts. Yeah.
A little bit, not much.
Not much,
small silver belts, each with a clasp wrought like a golden flower. That's about it.
Yeah. At least it has a description as opposed to just a belt of gold.
Well, that's true. Once again, we get a gold and silver contrast.
Yeah, we do. You're right. A silver belt with a golden flower clasp. I don't think I'd caught that.
Yeah. So that's 4 down in the space of a couple of extra sentences. We got one more here, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We get Legolas. And I love this because we get a bow that isn't slender. We get a bow to replace the slender bow, the longer, stouter bow.
That's nice.
It really is.
That's nice.
And of course, a quiver of arrows, because what good is a bow without arrows?
Sure.
And interestingly, this bow is strung with a string of elf hair.
Is that weird? That seems weird to me.
It does seem weird to me. Like, is it really that strong? Is it really that elastic? Can you really use that to fire an arrow? I don't know. But I'll tell you this, it's almost certainly not Galadriel's hair.
No, it's certainly not. She's not just giving that stuff away, is she?
No, she's not. Only to short guys with sweet-talking mouths.
Yes, indeed.
Say those nice things to me again, Gimli.
But we're not going to get there today.
No, we're not. That's the next time.
Because Celeborn needed another reason to hate dwarves.
I can't even get her to give me any of her hair. Oh, my goodness. That is going to be great.
Man.
Let's make sure we bring that in next week.
Let's do.
All right. Well, we may have introduced some of the gifts, but now we have a gift for you. Okay, fair enough. Gift might be too strong a word, but we do have Bartleman's bag coming your way in just a minute. And even when that's done, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode, as well as updates from us throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
And of course, now we have another common room over on Reddit. You can find great discussions there at r/PrancingPonyPod. And as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram with the handle @PrancingPonyPod. So follow us wherever you happen to be. And if you like us, please consider sharing us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, wherever you happen to find Tolkien fans.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is. That helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans we built together.
And finally, if you want access to exclusive content like postscripts, quarterly specials, PPP swag, and more, well, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast.
We are very close now to our next goal of doing 2 moots every year, which we look forward to doing just as soon as we can travel again.
Yeah, seriously. And we can't get there, though, without your help. We've got lots of cool bonus content and gifts to make it worth your while, including a chance to join our Discord server where you'll be able to hang out with us once a month and even listen in live while we record a podcast episode like a few dozen of our friends are doing right at this moment.
That's right. So if you're interested in joining, or if you'd just like to see how we're doing on our goals, visit patreon.com/prancingponypod.
Now, I think it's time to see what old Bartleman has in the mailbag for us tonight. Sean?
Our first one tonight comes from our old friend Arthur H. He says, Aragorn was quick to make mock of Bilbo for having the cheek to make verses about Eärendil in the House of Elrond. Why was he reluctant to call out Boromir for making an old wives' tale reference in the presence of Galadriel, who, for the record, is literally the oldest wife in Middle-earth? Celeborn gets husband points for immediately noting that there is frequently wisdom in what old wives say. Yes, he learned from watching Thingol.
Well played.
Talk about a cautionary tale.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah, so, okay, we talked about the value of old wives' tales earlier. Now, why don't we speculate a little bit on why Aragorn doesn't call out Boromir for dismissing old wives' tales, the way he called out Bilbo for having the cheek to sing about Big Daddy Eärendil in Elrond's house. Alan, what do you got?
Big Daddy. I like that one, Sean. That's good.
Thank you.
But aside from that digression, I think we have 2 factors that are at work here. The first, and really the simplest explanation, is that Celeborn was talking. Boromir's comment here is really an interruption of sorts, as Celeborn hasn't necessarily finished his geography lesson. So
Aragorn's not going to prolong the interruption. He's like,
right,
exactly. Be quiet, let the man talk. Yeah,
exactly.
Let the elf talk. Yeah,
especially Celeborn. I mean, he's my grandfather-in-law, or going to be.
Right.
But I also think, and I have to guess that this is where you'd be going, Aragorn knew that Bilbo knew what he was talking about. That is, Bilbo, having lived in Rivendell and being very familiar with the legends that he'd heard in the Hall of Fire, was well aware of exactly what he was saying. And he was writing a poem. So it's not like Bilbo wouldn't have had time to edit. Boromir's statement here is really just off the cuff. He doesn't necessarily know that Galadriel is an old wife.
Boromir just lacks a filter. Bilbo should have known better.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, that is kind of where I'm going with it. I tend to think Aragorn, kind of what you said, I think Aragorn just expects more from Bilbo than he does from Boromir.
Yeah.
Boromir is a man of Gondor, and we know that comes with, well, certain biases. They don't know as much about the world as they used to. And we've seen that Boromir he's got this cocksureness to him that causes him to be a little bit distrustful of things he doesn't understand and a little bit dismissive of things that he looks down on. And, you combine all that with, the fact that he is educated. He is an experienced warrior.
Right.
He's well educated. Maybe not quite the scholar that his brother is, but certainly well educated. And he is wise in the ways of the world, at least according to Gondorian standards. And so he has this tendency to look down on old wives' tales. That's perfectly in character for him. That's exactly what we would expect Boromir to do. And
Mhm.
so I don't think anybody there is shocked to hear Boromir say what he did.
No, it's very much a Boromir thing. Yeah.
It's very in character. It's very on brand for Boromir to kind of laugh off old wives' tales about Fangorn Forest.
Mhm.
Bilbo, on the other hand, is an elf friend and knows Elrond, and he knows all about Elrond's household. He knows who lives there. He lives there. And he
Sure.
knows about the lore of the First Age. I mean, he's been hanging out in the library reading all those books. And like you said, Bilbo knew what he was doing by mentioning
Oh, yeah.
Eärendil in Elrond's house. And
Yeah.
I suppose Aragorn probably thought he should just be a little bit more respectful. Now, obviously, Elrond didn't mind, but I think that's
No.
where Aragorn was coming from. Bilbo
I
is
think
like,
so,
dude,
too.
you should have known better, whereas Boromir's just being Boromir.
Exactly. That is just Boromir being Boromir. You're right.
Yeah.
Good way to put
What
it.
about the husband points? You think Celeborn learned what not to do by watching Thingol?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt. When he says, old wives keep in memory word of things that once were needful for the wise to know, notice that not only is Galadriel an old wife, but also that he, Celeborn, is the wise, right? Needful for the wise to know. He's clearly talking about something very close to home for him. Frankly, I'm sure Galadriel is always reminding him of things that he's forgotten.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
are my keys, honey? They're on the kitchen counter.
Should I be rude to the dwarf? No. Should I be racist to the dwarf? Again, no.
No, he's our guest, honey.
That's right. But do I have to feed them? No. You don't have to do that, apparently. All right.
Just you watch. I'm going to give him some of my hair.
You're going to what now?
You're going to what?
You're going to give him, you're going to what to the what? Who? I'm so sorry. All right. Well, before we get too much further down that digression, what else do we have in the mailbag tonight?
Okay. Matt B. from Hayesville, North Carolina writes, back in your episode on Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire from The Hobbit, it's going back to season 2, he says Sean joked about using the phrase escaping goblins to be caught by wolves in everyday life. That got me wondering if your passion for Tolkien has caused some actual idiosyncrasies and strong reactions in real life. If so,
this podcast is kind of an idiosyncrasy.
It is quite, yeah. If so, could you share some of these? Oh, man.
Oh, wow. That might be
Matt
asking a lot there, Matt.
He offers a story of his own. He's not going to ask us to do anything he wouldn't do. So he shares that, in my life, I hire a lot of high school and college-age students. I normally conclude my interviews with the question, who is your favorite Lord of the Rings character? I've gotten a lot of strange reactions to this question over the years, but still ask it nonetheless for my own enjoyment. Occasionally, I am surprised by a thoughtful answer, but more often I'm appalled how few have watched the movies, much less read the books.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. And since watching your show, I normally segue into a more traditional closing of the interview with, but I digress.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. I love it. He's gone from an actual Tolkien idiosyncrasy to a PPP idiosyncrasy.
To a PPP idiosyncrasy, which is pretty awesome.
That's great. So, my
thank
heart
you for that, Matt. We are we're humbled by that.
Yes,
but Alan, do you have any Tolkien related quirks or idiosyncrasies that so-called normal people have noticed?
Of course, you had to ask me first. Thanks a lot, Sean. Appreciate that. Actually, the truth is that for that to be the case, I'd have to interact with so-called normal people. I don't know that I do that much anymore. And not just because of the self-isolation. I mean, I'm a voiceover actor, so most of my work is done in a booth. When I'm not that, I'm an architectural photographer, so I'm shooting properties, and usually I'm by myself or maybe with one person. So I don't interact with a lot of normal people. Most of my interactions are with our Discord folks or with our listeners on Facebook or with people at Tolkien moots and things like that. But I mean, there's my family, but they expect me to have a Tolkien reference for just about everything.
Yeah.
But if I drop movie lines sometimes, yeah, probably. If I'm with people that I think might have geek nerd tendencies, it's sort of my way of feeling them out a little bit. I might say something like, there may come a day, or, I might talk about how I'm very dangerous over short distances. I don't know, maybe a meat's back on the menu, boys, if it's time to light the grill. But honestly, I try to save the book quotes for people that I know will understand.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you want to relate to so-called normal people, you kind of have to come out with the references that they're going to get to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Not always. Yeah. Every once in a while, I see what I can get away with just to get an odd look. But yeah, I think I do tend to stick more to movie lines. I don't know that there's really any specific idiosyncrasy that I have. I mean, Here's one from the book. I do tend to use the phrase, it needs a week's answer or none.
Oh, gosh, I just used that the other day, yeah.
Did you? Yeah, I use that
Yeah.
one more often than I should, and I'm sure people are like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, mixed company, it's probably mostly movie lines.
Yeah.
I want to make sure people are going to get what I'm saying. There's no sense in
Right.
alienating them more than they're already alienated. I do sometimes do my Gollum voice at the dinner table, but that's usually because my kids ask me to.
Well,
they get a
right.
kick out of it.
And that is awesome. Yeah.
I mean, truthfully, I think most of the people that I know well enough to like be myself around, I think they know that I do this podcast. And so,
Yeah.
you know, they know it's my thing. And so if they hear me say something Tolkienish, or if I guess I'll put it this way, if they hear me say some reference that they don't get, they're probably going to assume it's a Tolkien reference.
Yeah, that's right. That probably will.
And there's not really a strong reaction. It's just Sean being Sean. If
Yeah.
they hear me drop like a Monty Python reference or something, that's totally Sean being Sean. So it's just like one of those other things like, oh, that's just Sean. You know,
It's just him. I get the same thing, of course. It usually comes with a lot of eye rolling as well.
For sure.
So
yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Please be sure to join us again next week when Sam gets a gift certificate to the Home Depot for gardening supplies.
That's a nice idea. I'm not sure they have Malorn seeds in the garden center, though.
No, they're awfully big. They're probably, they're in the little glass case and you have to go get somebody with a key.
Right.
I'd like
Because
one
it comes
of
in
the
that
Malorn
box. I mean,
seeds,
the box
please.
is worth as much as the seed itself.
Oh, at least. They're limited edition, all of that.
Yeah.
Now, as always, folks, we want to thank each of you for listening, but we do want to give a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdans contribution tier. James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, Mario in Utah, Seth in Texas, Ella in California, Joseph in Texas, and Kathy from North Carolina. Thank you all so very much.
And make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, your long and stout bows, because our slender bows are just done, to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barliman has been left behind by the flowing streams of time at this point, so he's nowhere near punctual with the mail. But we will get back to you as soon as we can. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
Indeed. Well, folks, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.